but I was able to practice networking, which is something I never thought I would need to do. But as someone who is so shy and so frightened of saying the wrong thing or coming across the wrong way, it was like I needed networking practice, which is something people don't tell you, is that you need to practice networking and just talking to people and being a human.
Hey Hatchlings, welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. I'm your host, Hayley Akins. Hey Hatchlings, and welcome to the Motion Hatch podcast. This is episode 51. Today I chatted with Allison Butler about how she created a local motion graphics meetup in Connecticut and how that helped her with her freelance career. Also, Allison is one of our mastermind students, so we did speak a little about that in the episode as well. We will be opening up our applications for our next session in January very soon. So whether you're aiming to grow your client base, update your portfolio, or complete a personal project, the Mastermind program provides you with the support and accountability you need to achieve your career goals. So if you're interested in joining our mastermind or you want to find out a little bit more, go to motionhatch.com/mastermind. Now let's get into the episode. Hey Allison, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Hayley. I'm glad to be here.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into motion design?
Yeah, well, I think everyone has a strange journey into motion design. Most people don't seem to take the normal college route, or if they do, they're very lucky. Well, I started my college career doing just video production and television production, which I thought is what I wanted to do because it seemed like what the jobs were in my area in Connecticut. I spent all my time learning how to point a camera at things, set up microphones, and then did very, very little post-production world. Like, we learned how to video edit, but I always had a passion for animation and motion design, but I didn't really quite know that was something you could do full-time. I thought it was kind of like you would become a video editor and then you could make the lower thirds and the title graphics, and that's the only option you had if you wanted to get into motion graphics. And then as soon as I graduated in 2016, I kind of discovered the whole world of motion design. And it's like, oh my gosh, I could do this full time and not have to work on like 3D animated feature. Like I can just do 1 minute explainer videos. Like there's a market for this. And it's like, well, what did I just go to college for? So I kind of decided to almost create my own college program right after I graduated. I started taking School of Motion courses, After Effects Kickstart, Animation Bootcamp, and just started teaching myself motion design.
I think that a lot of people have done kind of similar things. So like I did film production technology at university and stuff. Like you say, it's not often that people are like, oh yeah, I know that I want to do animation and stuff like that. It's surprising how many people come on the podcast and they say like, oh, I did music before or video and stuff like that. I guess it's because it's kind of related, but then you sort of figure out your own path. So when you graduated, you did like a few years full time before you started freelancing and stuff?
Yeah. When I was in school, I kind of had an internship, like a paid internship that just kind of turned into my part-time job that I had during school. Okay. I worked full-time as a kind of a one-woman show. I was doing the videography, I was doing the video editing, and I was doing any motion graphics I could convince them to put into the videos.
How did you transition from doing that and then now you're mostly doing motion design stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How did that go?
It was rocky. I mean, I bet anyone says that their journey into freelance isn't exactly as smooth as I'd like it to be. But I feel like I never took the typical approach to freelancing because I feel like most people, they have their full-time job and they're doing stuff on the side. They're doing some networking events. They're building up their client base while they're at their full-time job. Whereas what I decided to do was I hated my job. The hours were terrible. I wasn't getting paid enough. And I didn't like being a generalist, like where I was doing everything from picking up the camera to, the final edit. I didn't really like having to do everything and not being a master at any one of those things. So I decided I wanted to find something new. The best option I saw for that was like, oh, well, I'll just find another full-time job. I'll just switch my jobs, whatever. But the first job that came across my plate is the one I took. The job I ended up taking was temporary. So it was only for the political season. So it'd start in July and end in November, the political season here in the US. And when I was sitting in the interview, they kind of asked me right then and there. It's like, oh, do you want to take this job? Like, we're looking for people really quick. We're starting like today if you can. I'm like, yeah, I want to do this. Like, I just didn't care because I was so desperate to get out of this other job. I was like, yeah, I'll take a temporary job. That'll be totally fine. And I just didn't think any further than that. And then probably the first month in that job, I was like, oh, okay. I either need to find another full-time job by November or I need to do something else. And so that's when it finally clicked. Like once I had left my other steady job and I was in this temporary gig, and it's like, well, I'm happier than I had been before. But now I'm screwed if I don't find anything to do.
How did you sort of cope with that? Because I find it very interesting, and something I always think about quite a lot is like when you're sort of in a position where you're backed into a corner a little bit, sometimes that can be a good thing. And sometimes it can be a bad thing. So I just wondered what your perspective on that is now, like sort of after the fact. And obviously, like, I don't know whether I recommend that to people to like back themselves into a corner, but it's always interesting to talk about that kind of stuff, like in hindsight, I think.
Yeah, I definitely would not recommend anyone do what I did. Just quitting their job with no plan at all and then deciding, or really just figuring out like, oh, did I make a mistake here after the fact? Not recommended at all. I think when I was at my other full-time job, I think there was something nagging me in the back of my brain, like, you should go freelance. Like, you don't seem to like, having to do what other people tell you to do. You want to make your own career goals. You want to be able to switch and become a full-time motion designer. But in your current job, you're not able to do that. So why don't you go freelance and then you can do it yourself? But I was always too scared and I was always too frightened to just jump into the freelance pool. So I feel like this jump to a temporary job was kind of like my brain's way of saying, here's a way to get you into freelance, but I'm like tricking you. I'm tricking you into doing this thing that you really want to do in the back of your head, but you're too scared to do. And as soon as I had that deadline, it really pushed me to do the freelance development, the freelance preparing that I really wanted to do, but was too frightened to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So yeah, I think like, because when I had that kind of transition from being in a full-time job, it's definitely like my decision to quit and go freelance. And I always felt like it took me like years, it basically took me like 2 years when I decided that I wanted to start freelancing, because I just, you just get scared and you don't feel like, you're like, oh, no one's going to hire me, even if you're good and you've been working in the industry for a while. I'm not saying that like freelance is the be all and end all. And I think some people like have really good full-time jobs and some people are more suited to that kind of work. But I feel like there are a lot of people out there who are in their full-time jobs and they're really good and they've been, they've got a few years under their belt kind of in the industry and stuff like that. But they're just kind of going, oh my God, I don't know, I can't leave. No one will hire me. Even if they do the work and like you say, do things like have clients after their day job and stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's really good thing to talk about, because I feel like people think that it's just them that thinks that, and it's obviously not. It's everybody.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, freelancing is never easy to jump into when you've only known full-time work. Even when my brain had tricked me into starting to go freelance, I was not at all prepared as I should be. I started kind of my journey in July of last year. At that point, I pretty much decided, okay, I should just learn some freelance stuff. And so I actually found Sonder Van Dyke has a course called the Ultimate Freelance Guide that I just discovered out of nowhere. Maybe someone recommended it to me, but discovered that, and it kind of took me through everything that I needed to know about like emailing clients and how to find clients and just kind of all this basic stuff I had just no experience with. Like, I'd communicated with, my bosses and kind of like clients in that sense. That was the one thing I was really, really frightened about in freelance. Like I was going to say the wrong thing. As soon as I got someone to hire me, I was going to turn them off from hiring me ever again. That was like my biggest fear. So the fact that I had like that course and then you actually came out with the contract bundle. As soon as I saw that you were like accepting pre-orders to make the US edition, I was like, okay, So she'll probably come out with that as soon as I need to go freelance in November. So I'm going to pre-order that, and then it's going to be ready for me, and then I'll know what I'm doing. And all these things were just really false senses of security that I was giving myself. Like, oh, if I learn this course, I get these contract bundles, I'm going to be so ready to go freelance in November. But I wasn't doing the networking I needed to do. I wasn't doing any of the client contacting. I was so frightened that my work wasn't good enough that I wasn't emailing clients. I wasn't doing anything. So when November hit, I was kind of stumbling around okay, I better start contacting people now. Again, not recommended to do this. Don't go freelance, have nothing to do, and then be like, I should contact some people now. I should go and email some people. No, do that before you just get dropped into the deep end. And so that's kind of when the mastermind came along and scooped me up, and I started to figure out what I needed to do.
So you were kind of already freelance when you joined the mastermind. You're kind of recommending that people basically have a plan before they go freelance. This is really good and really interesting because I think it's like that saying, isn't it? It's do what I say, not what I did. I
exactly
like that all the time about my career as well. So what made you want to join the MoGraph mastermind then?
I had been, I guess, freelance for about a month at that point when you started advertising about the mastermind. I only had one client at that point. So I had kind of found them through odd ways. I had been applying for a bunch of full-time jobs because that was, where my mind wanted to go. I wanted to be secure. I wanted to have a full-time job. So I was still applying for things, even though I kind of knew freelance was the path I was going to go down. I had interviewed at a full-time job, and I didn't get the job because they wanted someone with maybe some more 3D experience than I had. They just wanted someone with slightly different qualifications. It wasn't ever bad. Basically, after I didn't get the job, they kind of emailed me, but it's well, we didn't give you the full-time job, but would you do some freelance for us? And I was like, oh, here's my first freelance client. I guess I'm going to be freelance now. So I was I threw together one of the contracts from the contract bundle. I kind of figured out some email templates I could use from Sander Van Dyke's Ultimate Freelance Guide. And I was like, okay, here we go. Here's my first client. Going to get on the right foot. And that's kind of when I started calling myself freelance, was that exact moment. But that was my only client. So it was every month, though, I had consistent work from them. I was getting a couple videos every single month that I would do for them. So it was really nice to have my first client be consistent work. But that was all I was going off of when the mastermind came around. So as soon as I saw that, it was it kind of felt like it was meant to be. It's oh, here I am floundering around, just reading a few books here and there, the Freelance Manifesto in one hand. I had this Ultimate Freelance Guide in another, and then the contract bundles if I happened to get a client. And so it just felt like exactly what I needed, a more structured way to keep me accountable and just really get me to get my butt in gear. I was so scared of being freelance. I was like, well, what if I just kind of say I'm freelance, but I'm still looking for full-time work in the background? And for some reason, I was just so frightened of having freelancing being my new identity, if that makes any sense. Yeah. It was I was too afraid to identify myself as a freelancer because I just felt that would take me off the full-time market.
It's sort of that community aspect, because I know that you didn't really have a lot of other people around you who were doing the same sort of thing. So do you think that's where the fear of calling yourself freelance sort of came from?
Yeah, I'd definitely say that is probably where my freelance fear came from, because I'm in Connecticut, and anyone who knows where Connecticut is in the US, it's basically smack dab between Boston, Massachusetts, and New York City. You'd think that makes you in a good place, but really it's so far away from both that it kind of puts you in this weird limbo where everyone moves out of Connecticut, either because the taxes are too high or they have some other complaint about Connecticut. There's a little bit of a creative market, but not much for freelancers. You just have to try really hard if you're going to be a freelancer in Connecticut. And so people, they kind of hide away in their corners, and they're doing all remote work if they're in Connecticut. So you don't see that there are freelancers here. Yeah, when I was going freelance, it's I didn't see anyone like me. I was oh, everyone's at ESPN. Everyone's at these studios down in Stamford near New York. nobody does what I'm trying to do. Like, am I going to be successful? But yeah, through creating a meetup, I was kind of able to start cultivating more of a community here in Connecticut. And everyone started coming out of the woodwork. It's like, oh my gosh, finally someone decided to make a meetup. Everyone came out of their little quiet corners and started being like, yeah, like I've been doing freelance for 20 years. I've been doing it for 5 years. Like I've been here doing remote work and just sitting alone in my house. So it's nice to like crawl out and talk to some people.
Yeah, I'd love to talk more about that because I think it's really interesting. Because I remember when we were doing the calls in the mastermind and stuff, we're looking, like what you're saying, you were looking for community in your area.
Yeah.
And it just didn't seem like there was. So like, I guess like take us through like the steps of what you did in the beginning, like before you made the meetup to try and find that community. Like where were the places that you were looking for that?
I started kind of just looking online and looking on meetup.com and looking for any little group I could find because, I'd look at School of Motion has a list of, every meetup that they know of in the United States. And I was looking on there. Again, the closest things were New York, Boston. So I was like, okay, I don't want to drive 2 hours just to go to a meetup. And that doesn't really even relate to where I am and the kind of industry I'm trying to break into. So I started looking for every little networking event I could find. So luckily I joined a co-working space, which is actually kind of the big step that kind of got me into the networking mindset because I was very, very shy. I didn't like going out of my little bubble to talk to people when I didn't have to. It kind of forced me to sit in a space where people could come up to my desk randomly and just start talking to me. They were my coworkers because, we were in a co-working space, but we didn't have to communicate if we didn't want to, but people were just so friendly and coming up to me, and it kind of broke down my shyness, and I was like forced to talk to people that I normally wouldn't. And they host so many good networking events here. They have a beer and business that's like just this really casual networking event. They play a TED Talk, and you can have your lunch and then talk about the TED Talk. And just like really nice casual networking events like that got me kind of relaxed. And so I was able to like just start talking to people who weren't even necessarily in my industry, but I was able to practice networking, which is something I never thought I would need to do. But as someone who is so shy and so frightened of saying the wrong thing or coming across the wrong way, it was like I needed networking practice, which is something people don't tell you, is that you need to practice networking and just talking to people and being a human.
Yeah, and like having that confidence, I guess, to say like what you do and think about like how you can maybe help those people. Like I think it's actually a good thing to like not always talk to people in your industry, is to like meet other people outside of the industry, because we can like, you sort of have this like strange feedback loop in motion design where it's like it's always the same thing and the same people and then everyone's trying to get work, and like obviously a lot of people are really good at like sharing work and freelancers recommending each other and stuff like that. I think it's fantastic, but like sometimes you need to meet other people outside the industry because then maybe they would be more likely to be the people that would hire you too. So you're saying that basically joining a co-working space was like a big thing, you feel that kind of shifted a lot of stuff for you as well?
Yeah, definitely. It shifted my mindset and it made me feel more like a business person. Because when you say you're a freelancer, at first it doesn't mean a lot. And so the fact that I joined a co-working space and I was talking to like people who were running their own businesses, and there's even a business advisor here. And so I was able to talk to her, and she kind of bumped it into my head that I was a business. I wasn't just a freelancer. Just saying freelancer, it doesn't mean a lot, but saying like, you're a businesswoman now, like you're running your own business. And it just kind of hit me. It's like, oh yeah, I am a businesswoman. I need to be doing business stuff. So that's kind of when my mindset changed, and I just went into full throttle mode at that point. And I was like, okay, yes, I got to network. I got to reach out to clients. I got to make sure my portfolio comes across as professional. And it was like all these things that it like kind of suddenly clicked when I joined this co-working space.
Is there like a particular place where you found out about that? I'm just thinking if other people are like listening to this going, oh yeah, that sounds good. Where can I like find out about stuff like that? I don't know whether it would be relevant, but.
Well, the co-working space that I'm a part of it's not one of those chains, but I know
Okay, yeah.
there are some chains. I think like, was it Upwork is one now?
Oh, WeWork.
WeWork, yep. WeWork is that chain of networking spaces, so there might be one of those in your area. But really, for me, I just had to do a Google search because the closest WeWork was like in Hartford, which is it's like 45 minutes away from where I live. So it's like, I don't
Oh,
really feel
right,
like
yeah.
commuting that far just to go to my co-working space. So I found this municipally owned co-working space by the town of Manchester in Connecticut called Workspace. They're a great little community co-working space that's just owned by the town of Manchester. And I know there's a ton of other spaces like that because I remember I was going to a vacation in Rhode Island and I was like, I might need to do some work while I'm there. I wonder if there's a co-working space near there. So I did a quick Google search and it was like, yeah, there's just this little co-working space not owned by any corporation. It's just there in this town that I would have never expected. So yeah, just Googling co-working space, you might get somewhere.
Yeah, no, I think it's stuff that people don't think about just to try and like get more out there and like you say, like out your own house and your own little corner
Yeah.
where you might be struggling a little bit. So I think that's really nice. So yeah, I wanted to talk a bit more about the meetup that you started then. So you kind of started networking, you were in the co-working space. Like how did the meetup come about and how was the start of that and where is it going now basically?
So yeah, I was doing all this networking at my co-working space
Mhm.
and talking to people outside my industry, which again was very good. Wouldn't change that for the world. But then I was trying to find just even more designers, more creatives, because there's a lot of business people around this area, but I wanted to connect with more creatives in person. You can talk online as long as you want, but it's not quite the same as having people who you've met in person that are in your area. And once you kind of have that connection with someone, it's like, you're trading work to each other. You're saying like, hey, this worked for me in this area. It's like more specific. You need specific advice when you're getting started. And that's what I felt like I lacked. I didn't have anyone in my area who could tell me, yeah, here's what worked for me. Why don't you try this? And so I found an AIGA, this Graphic Designers Association, I thought would be pretty
Yeah.
close. So I went to a few of their meetings and started communicating with graphic designers. But again, it didn't feel quite like my community. Like it was closer. It was creatives I was talking to, which was really nice, but they didn't have a ton of events and I thought I could do better, I guess. And so some of their events were quite casual. It was just kind of you could come for free and you could just kind of talk and network and talk about ways to better AIGA. And so it's like, I could just kind of do this with just some motion designers, just find a couple of motion designers to gather up, bring them somewhere, and just sit down and talk. Like, it can't be that hard. When I was in the mastermind, we talked about this a lot, and people were just giving me great suggestions about, like, do it in a coffee shop, do it in a bar, just do it somewhere where people can get food if they want. That way you can kind of convince people to go after work. Just like those little pieces of advice really helped me see that I could make my own meetup. Because at first I was like, oh, do I have to like put on some big event? Do I have to like get a speaker? Like, who would speak in Connecticut? Like, I don't know anyone who was that popular that could bring people in. But no, people just
Yeah.
want to come and talk and just connect with people in their area because it's more important than you think. Everyone has these online platforms to talk to and chat with people, and they're absolutely wonderful. But people still really want that in person connection. They want to know people in their area. They just want to know who's around.
You found it a little bit easier making connections with people in your area to maybe like share work and things like that you felt quite isolated, I guess, otherwise. Like, and you
Hmm.
tried, I like that you kind of got prepared on the side with like Sanders course and
Mm-hmm.
the contract bundle and then reading the freelance manifesto, and I think they're all really, really great things. That's almost like you've got like a great foundation there, and then obviously joining the mastermind, and then we were talking to you about these things, about more like trying to find people in your area and stuff, because that's the thing, isn't it? About it's good to really be involved with the online community too. And I feel like it's really beneficial because then you get to know everyone all over the world. But sometimes you do need people who are like a bit closer to you. And especially when you're first starting out freelance, I always think that's the best place to start. It's like either your network that you already know or like your local network, and then kind of branching out from there. After you've done that, then you can kind of start, widening your scope, I guess. Is that kind of how you feel about it too?
Yeah. Yeah. Because even though I had the online communities, it always felt like I was missing something. You kind of want to talk to people in your area about who hires in this area. What studios don't I know about? Like, who am I not finding through a Google search? Or, do you know who the creative director is at this studio? Like, even simple things like that. You can't really go online for that. Just getting the knowledge of, are people successful in your area, was something that I was kind of lacking, because I still had that fear that people weren't hiring motion designers in Connecticut. If I couldn't find them, how would I know if it was a good career if I had to move? I had no idea if I wasn't finding people in Connecticut. Through the meetup, I've kind of almost cultivated what I wish I had at the beginning of my career, because there's at least one person I'm thinking of who goes to my meetup, who is at a kind of a dead-end job, doesn't like it, and wants to go full-time motion design, but they can't at this moment because they feel stuck. But we've been slowly prodding him and saying, like, no, like, here's like a few of us. We're all full-time motion designers now. Like, we're freelance, and you can do it. You just have to kind of connect with people remotely or connect with studios in the area, and just even get to know people here at this meetup. Because I've already had a few instances of people at my meetup, like, who got to know me, and then they had a full plate and they were like, hey, Allison's really cool. Go see if she has time for your project. So it's already been a way I've gotten work too.
That's amazing. I think it's like just from, like when we first met to now, I feel like you just completely like transformed. A lot of it, I think, is to do with, finding this meetup and creating it and like having the confidence to do that, which I think is amazing. And that's why I'm just so like, wanted to talk to you about it on this podcast, because I feel like it's something that people don't think to do enough themselves. And as the industry is growing, like out of like the main cities that seems like it more started in, like out of like LA and London and all these places, and like motion design is like popping up like everywhere now almost. And I think it's really nice. People are just starting to feel like they can make their own meetups and stuff like that. And I just kind of want to encourage people to do that a bit more. So that's why I think it's really nice to speak to you about it.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us like how the meetup is going now and what kind of plans you have for it in the future?
Yeah, so the meetup's been chugging along. I say these numbers and they probably don't sound impressive to people, but we had 15 people at our first meetup, which was far more than I was expecting. I think like 5 people RSVP'd to it, and so we had triple the number that RSVP'd, so that was pretty great. I mean, for such a small community, I say 15 people is pretty big. So far it's been
great.
Yeah. Over the summer, because I started the meetup in May, so over the summer things kind of like they dwindled, people went on their vacations, but there was always like kind of a core of us who would always meet, always catch up with each other month to month. And so it's just been chugging along. And last month we actually had it here at my coworking space, because they have their beer and business. And part of what they do for beer and business is they take one of their members and make them kind of like a co-host of the event. And so you kind of go up on their little mini stage and you talk about your industry, your career. And so it was another just way to get myself out there, which I never thought I would have been doing months ago. I never thought I'd be able to give an elevator pitch so succinctly as I do now, which is amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
Like, how did you feel about that? Yeah, like how did you kind of get over that fear, I guess?
Yeah, I just went to enough networking events, and I was put on the spot so many times, because I would go to beer and business just as someone who'd be wandering around networking, and every single time the manager of Workspace here would point to every Workspace member in the audience and be like, hey, you're a member of Workspace, Allison. Give us your elevator pitch. And it's like, oh God, I'm on the spot. What do I do? And once you're on the spot like that, your brain just kind of goes on autopilot. And so since I'd been telling enough people about my business, just quietly, networking, I was able to give an elevator pitch. And I was like, well, since when do I have that skill to tell people what I do? And then I'm a motion designer, animator, video editor, who works on all this cool content for small businesses. Like, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could make this
Yeah.
cool elevator pitch.
Yeah, that's really good because people are very scared of speaking and stuff. So I think it's great that you've decided to do a bit of that as well. It's awesome. Do you have any plans for the meetup in the future that you want to do? Or are you just kind of trying to grow the audience for it, I guess?
Yeah. Well, ever since we had such success with the beer and business event, because, we had a lot of people come and we'll just see the co-working space and they're like, huh, I might join a co-working space now too. Ever since beer and business went so well, I've been really wanting to do more with the meetup and kind of just have more interesting events that will bring people. Because, people will come and just casually network and hang out and have some coffee, have some beer, whatever. Doing that every single month, I know will get boring and it won't bring anybody new in. So I've been kind of wanting to do maybe some more developing stuff for starting motion designers, things that I wanted when I was starting out. Things like people could bring their demo reel and say, hey, can we all review this together? And just have like maybe one or two people and we give them great feedback on their demo reel or their portfolios. I'd really want to build up people who are starting out and maybe find a speaker. Maybe they're a business professional. Maybe they're someone in the motion design world. Something like that is something I've been thinking of doing. Or even we have a few agencies and studios in Connecticut that are kind of hidden away, or even in-house places, like an in-house place
Yeah.
I work at. They've been really supportive about the meetup, and I've been thinking of asking them, like, hey, would you want to host a meetup here? Like, would you want to take your in-house motion designers and invite them to stay the night and just chat and network and maybe have someone at the company speak about what they do there?
Yeah, I think that's great. So, like, what would you say to someone if someone's listening to this and they're like, oh, cool, like, I'd like to do what Allison's done and start a meetup in my area?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are the first kind of couple of steps, let's say, of doing that, do you think, that would help?
Well, I definitely say one of the first things I did was just reach out to people I could find online. So I just searched on LinkedIn for people with the title motion designer in Connecticut. And I found like a couple people here and there. And like one person was really great and they reached out to me back and they were like, wow, I'm so glad there's like another person in Eastern Connecticut who's a motion designer. Like, it's really great to see you and see you're trying to start a community. Just reaching out to a few people like that, or on Slack groups, Twitter, wherever you know of maybe one or two people in your area, just to see if there's interest. Because that's what really helped me, see that people would come to this thing. If I could prove to myself, like, if you can find one or two people in your area who are pumped to have a meetup, I say that's all you need. You really just need one other person. There's your meetup. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, so I was able to kind of convince myself, okay, this is possible once I reached out to people individually and asked them, like, hey, would you be interested in a meetup? Where's a good central location for you? That was another question I asked people. And just kind of probing a few questions like where do you like hanging out? Where's a good central location? Kind of made me feel better about making sure I organized it in a place where people would come. I don't think you have to think that hard. I'm very self-conscious about these things. But if it makes you feel better, then you can just communicate with folks in your area and just kind of like create who you'd want the meetup to be including, like who you want to include in the meetup. Just kind of search those people out. Then what I did was I just went on meetup.com, made a group. Whoever I had reached out to individually, I just went back to him and said, like, hey, I started this group on Meetup. I'd love for you to join. And like, here's our first event. Let's see, I made it on the second Tuesday of every month. That way it's consistent. And so people remember where it is or when it is. Made it at the same place every time. Then I just reached out to those people again and was like, hey, here it is. Come if you want.
I think that's really smart actually to make it like a consistent thing because then people like remember. Otherwise, if it was like, oh, you did one, but then you just didn't do anything after that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would have, you would have the momentum and doing the stuff that you are now. I feel like it could have
Yeah.
been very easy to just do one, let it lie kind of thing. So I think that's really clever that you were like, no, it's going to be this and it's going to
Yep.
be, reoccurring and then everyone knows, right? And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Like this is like a thing.
Yeah. It's another bit of accountability.
Yeah,
That accountability
exactly.
is
Yeah.
very important for doing anything in your career, honestly. So the fact that I said, yeah, I'm going to do this every Tuesday or every second Tuesday of the month, that was like, okay, well, I'm stuck in this now. I have to do it. There are months where I haven't felt like going. It's like, oh, I've had a really long week, or I have client work I should be doing. Like, I shouldn't go to this meetup, but it's like, well, I'm hosting it. I have to go, even if I'm the only person who shows up to this meetup. But so far, I've never been alone. I've always had at least a couple people who show up to the meetup, and it works.
That's great. I think it's amazing. And like you say, it's even like, even if you reach out to like one other motion designer and you're like, hey, let's go and like have a coffee or something like that. Like that's the start of it, these things, isn't it? And I think it's fantastic.
Exactly.
Do you have like one tip that you would give yourself now if you were just starting out in your freelance journey?
Oh, gosh. Well, get clients before you start freelancing. That would be my number one piece of advice. But otherwise, I guess it would be really get over your fears of networking. Because that was why I didn't have any clients before I started freelancing. Was I was afraid to go to networking events. I was afraid to just talk to people. It sounds so insane, but I was just that shy, and I was so used to being in-house that I never had to talk to other people. I talked to my coworkers, and these were people I knew and felt comfortable with. Well, I guess there's another piece of advice is get outside your comfort zone, because that's the only way you're going to be successful as a freelancer. Getting outside of my comfort zone is when I started succeeding. And ever since, I've been less afraid to get outside my comfort zone and really take risks that I never thought would be possible.
That's really good advice. I think like, you know, what you were saying about like fear of like networking, stuff like that. Do you feel like that comes down to sort of having confidence in your work and yourself? Do you feel like that's where that was coming from?
Yeah, definitely. Since I had only been in-house and had never been a full-time motion designer yet, I was this one-person show. You know, I was doing everything. So I never felt like I had the expertise as a full-time motion designer. You know, I was making some social media videos here and there. I was making mostly on-screen graphics for videos, you know, lower thirds, like little pop-up things, titles. So I didn't feel like I had the skills to be a full-time motion designer, especially a full-time freelance motion designer. I just didn't feel like I ever had the skills. But something I learned very quickly is like, you can teach yourself to do anything. You know, I made an explainer video for a client not that long ago, and I had never made an explainer video before. I never even had taken explainer camp. So I was going blind, but I went through it. I made it work. And that's something I did when I was in-house, but it didn't click for me that like, even if you don't know how to do something, you'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice, because I think it starts before the kind of networking stuff and things like that. Maybe it's stuff like, I'm thinking like, what can people do before they even get to that stage? You know, like having the people review your work, like stuff that you were talking about before, like showing other people your portfolio who you like trust, ask for like constructive feedback and stuff like that, you know, and not just like your family and your friends, like, you know, like people in the industry or people that you know online, if you don't know people in your area. And, you know, obviously like we'll have the MoGraph mastermind coming up and people can join that. And that's another thing that we do in that is obviously like reviewing work and stuff as well. I think that's like kind of a good starting point, you know, just asking other people to take a look at your work and then they can like, normally other people have a better idea of where you're at and then you can kind of give you a bit more confidence, I think, as well. So I think that's really good.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I found, well, even online, there are great, you know, Facebook groups and like the motion design Slack. They're great places, but a lot of the time people give kind of fluffy feedback is the best way I can think of it. People say like, oh yeah, it looks great. Or they just kind of give you a thumbs up and it's like, yeah, looks good. And if they don't like it, they don't say anything. So you really need to find that more close-knit group of people that you trust. Even if you're reaching out to people directly, people you respect, as soon as you find that close-knit group, like the mastermind group that we had, everyone was comfortable. Everyone knew each other so well that we could give each other honest feedback and say, like, that thing isn't working that well. And we weren't afraid of hurting each other's feelings because we knew we were bettering each other. So once you find a group like that, that's what you need.
Yeah, I think that's right, because you're right. If you're just sort of going on Twitter and being like, hey guys, what do you think? That's not like the same as having kind of, more in-depth feedback and stuff. If people are in Connecticut in your area, do you want to tell them about where they can find the meetup and where they could come along to it?
So like I said, the meetups happen the second Tuesday of every month. So you can always go to the meetup page and find out when that is if you don't want to look at a calendar. So it's meetup.com/CT-MoGraph meetup.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes, of course, for everybody, and they can have a look if they want to come and join your meetup, which is really cool. So do you want to tell the audience where they can find you and your work as well?
Yeah. All my social medias, I'm Allison B Motion, Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn, I have that handle. So that's where you can find me.
Cool. And is that your website as well?
Oh, yes. My website, AllisonButler.tv. And in case you spell Allison a different way than I do, it's Allison.
Yeah, well, that's good. And like we said, we'll put everything in the show notes so everyone can find everything. So yeah, cool. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been awesome.
Oh yeah, it's been a pleasure, Haley.
Thanks again to Allison for coming on the show. You can find all the show notes and the links at motionhatch.com/51. Let us know what you thought of this episode. We are at motionhatch on Twitter and Instagram. It would be amazing if you could leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. This really helps us get the podcast out there and helps more motion designers with their businesses and careers. Thanks again. I really appreciate you. See ya.